Welcome to
What the World is Watching.
Here's your host,
John and Doska.
Welcome to the show, everybody. Happy 2015, and I really just want to start out, get right into it, by thanking everybody who checked out our first episode with Jim Cornette. We got a great response, and I'd like to thank everybody who subscribed and followed and downloaded and just showed us lots of love for that, and we really appreciate it, and we have a lot more stuff coming your way. And we're going to really, we did a little bit of a soft launch, and that was a couple weeks ago. Kind of worked out the kinks and kind of, got a roadmap together where we're going to be heading moving forward. And we're going to be hitting the ground running right now. And just to give everybody a little bit of an idea of the way things will be kind of formatted moving forward, is that every Tuesday we're going to be releasing an interview, a special interview with a guest, and then every Friday we're going to have kind of like another show. I guess you call it the B show, the Thunder, if you will, where we'll be talking about a lot of stuff on the network. I'll have a lot of different segments, kind of like the promo theater that we had a great response to, where we have different celebrity impersonations or different takes on different promos. We'll have a special segment called I Was There, where we have different fans and have their take on specific landmark moments in wrestling that they were in attendance for, and talk about what that experience was like being in the crowd and the atmosphere and all that sort of stuff. And then in general, I'll have some people, different people on from time to time, talking about different things that we like or don't like on the network. So there'll be a lot of stuff that we'll be covering on that B show. So I don't want to call it the B show, but maybe I guess you guys could be the judge and let us know what you think. But anyway, I want to talk about our guest that we have on today, Vince Russo. This guy is somebody who, he's a very polarizing figure in the world of wrestling, and but for some reason he's always been one of my favorites, and I don't really know why. Maybe it's because we have a lot in common, as we found out in this interview. But Vince is such a, for anything anybody thinks about this guy, he is just one hell of a nice guy, and it was great to sit down and get to talk with him, and we talked so much. There was so much that we had to talk about. Like I said, there was a lot we had in common between Kiss and actually the Rocky movies and all that sort of stuff, that we ended up talking for almost 2 hours. So what we're going to do is we're going to split this into two parts. So the first part here, you'll get a little bit more of some of the stuff outside of wrestling that Vince is into, and then the next interview, or the next part next time, we'll have more of Vince and his fandom of wrestling, and kind of how he kind of got into wrestling and everything else. It's a really interesting story, and that's the thing too. For anybody who's checking us out for the first time, this show focuses on what the guests are into, really. So, there's so many great podcasts that are out there, or different interviews, shoot interviews and things like that, where, these wrestling personalities will cover, their careers and their, all sorts of stuff, and just, kind of from A to Z, what their career timeline was, and cover different topics and different, inside stories and things like that. That's not really what we're doing here. Here on What the World is Watching is more based on just getting to know the guests in a different sort of way, what they're into, what their likes are, and a lot of times we'll talk about what they are fans of wrestling. So it's something that hopefully is a little bit of a different take, and hopefully you guys find entertaining, even if you're not a fan in particular of some stuff that that some of the guests are. But it is pretty interesting, at least to me, to find out another side and kind of what they're into. So we're gonna like I said, we're just gonna get right into it here with the interview with Vince Russo, and we'll be back with that right after this special message.
Nobody likes partying more than the rockers, but the party's over when you start smoking.
That's right, rocking and rolling, strutting and strolling doesn't include smoking. Be a survivor.
Don't smoke.
All right, I'd like to welcome my guest at this time. He's one of the most influential figures in the world of wrestling over the past 20 years, and he's been a writer, producer, performer. He's one of my all-time favorites. I'd like to welcome Vince Russo. Vince, thank you so much for joining me today.
No problem, man. It's my pleasure to be here.
Well, I really appreciate your time, and I want to start out before we get going with the regular portion of the interview. I want to start out by talking about pyroandballyhoo.com because I think it's really interesting what you've done with the website. It's not just wrestling. There's a lot more stuff there, and there's a lot of cool things going on. Can you talk about what people can expect for those who aren't familiar with it?
Yeah, it's definitely not all wrestling. If I had to talk about all wrestling all the time, I think I'd go absolutely out of my mind. So it's kind of all things that encompass, Vince Russo. I mean, that's what I like to say. I'm a big entertainment guy. I'm a big television guy. I'm a nostalgia, sports, anything that's interested me, gossip. I'm a fan of TMZ and all that kind of stuff. So, like anything that is interesting to me on any particular day, I'll write up. I'll wake up and I'll write about. I'm constantly writing new content on the site. Every day, and every day it's more or less different. It's just if I'm thinking about something, if something catches my eye, while I'm going through entertainment sites, if I hear something on television, and that's basically what it is.
And you have other people that contribute to the site too. It's not just you that's writing all the articles.
Yeah,
is that correct?
No, it's not. I mean, like I said, I do write every day. Both for the free site and our VIP site. In the VIP site, I get a little bit more into the behind the scenes of wrestling.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I'm not the only one. We do have a team of writers as well.
Well, you mentioned the VIP section, and it's worth stating here. I mean, I encourage everybody to go check it out. But there's a lot of exclusive content. I mean, there's a lot of stuff. Not everything is, you don't have to pay to access everything. There's a lot of great stuff you could find for free, but it's pretty much less than $1.50 per week, if I'm not mistaken. That you can access all this great content. I mean, you have all different. Access to video interviews and forums where people could talk to you, and lots of different cool things. Can you talk about the VIP section?
Yeah, no, that's exactly what it is, and it's you can check it out by going to pyroandballyhoo.com /VIP, and yeah, that's what it is. There's a lot of behind the scenes commentary on wrestling, a lot of stories, throughout my career. Plus, there's, exclusive, VIP video interviews that I do on a weekly basis. These interviews go for, about an hour and a half, and I have a new one up every week. So, it's for, like I said, like you said, there's a lot of free content on the site, but the VIP really goes above and beyond that. I write my own Raw show every Monday night before Raw airs, so then you can look at what I would have done, compared to what they did. I have a Raw review show, so it's just a lot of, extra exclusive content.
Well, that's great. Again, everybody should definitely check that out. And I guess your career has been well documented, and you've done a lot of interviews talking about your different trials and tribulations, writing and being a part of WWF, TNA, and WCW and all that. But today, what I want to talk to you about is I want to talk to Vince Russo, the fan, and just the regular guy, and kind of stuff that you're, maybe that you might not get asked every day, and just different things that you're into, especially you being a fan of wrestling. But one of the most, I guess, important aspects about you is the fact that you're a New Yorker. And my mom was born and raised in Long Island. My dad was born and raised in Brooklyn. So I've always, New York's had a special place for me. So, you were born in Brooklyn, correct?
I was born in Brooklyn and raised on Long Island, just like your mom and dad.
Okay, awesome. So what part of Brooklyn were you were born in, and what do you remember about Brooklyn back in the day?
Well, to be honest with you, I was just born in Brooklyn.
Oh, okay. So you were just born. Okay, gotcha. Okay.
I was literally born in a hospital in Brooklyn. but my parents lived in Long Island, at the time.
Okay, what?
And
okay.
yeah, no, and I mean, I loved growing up on Long Island. I just loved it. I think the main thing for me, and it's funny, I've obviously moved around, since Long Island,
Mm-hmm.
but I think the thing I'll always remember the most was just the sports scene in Long Island. And basically having two professional teams in every sport, and sports just dominated, Long Island, with Newsday and the Islanders. I was a huge New York Net fan from the ABA days.
Wow.
Huge.
Did they play at the old Comac Arena? Is that where they played, or
the Nassau Coliseum?
The Nassau, yeah.
What did you just say? What's the name of it?
The Comac Arena. Is that what it used to be?
Actually, it wasn't the Comac Arena. They used to play, believe it or not, before the Nassau Coliseum. They used to play in an arena in Garden City.
Oh, okay.
And I can't even remember the name of it. It was so long ago.
Wow.
But, they used to play at Garden City, and then they moved to the Nassau Coliseum. And, I mean, man, when I grew up, I was obsessed with Dr. J.
Oh,
and I used to love the Nets. I used to go to all the Net games. But, just the New York scene in general, and the sports scene and the sports talk radio, I love that stuff. And I mean, every move I've made since then, you can't get sports coverage like that anywhere else.
What part of Long Island did you grow up in? My mom was from Deer Park area.
Yeah, I know exactly where Deer Park is. As a matter of fact, they're right off the Deer Park exit, and I'm sure that you know this. There's a huge P.C. Richardson son. Yeah, and I actually worked in that store a couple of times.
Wow.
But I worked. I grew up further out east, around exit like 61, 62 off the LIE in a town called Farmingdale.
Oh, okay, yeah. Wow, small world. Everybody knows too that you're a big Giants fan, and I guess I if I'm not mistaken, they moved the team from New York to San Francisco probably before you were born. But they had the great teams in the '50s, with Bobby Thompson and Willie Mays and all that. Was that sort of a product of your family kind of following them, and you just followed suit, or because
no doubt about it. That was my father. My father was an avid New York Giants fan at the Polo Grounds. To this day, I love hearing him tell me the story about where he was when Bobby Thompson hit the home run, and
he was there. He was there. The shot heard around the world. He was there.
Yeah, exactly.
Wow.
Yeah, and so my father goes way back with the Giants, and quite frankly, they moved to San Francisco in 1959, and quite frankly, I never understood why he remained loyal, because a lot of the fans back then, when the Dodgers and the Giants moved, a lot of those people became Met fans.
Right. Yeah.
But thankfully, I would think that Willie Mays had a lot to do with it. I know my father was a huge Willie Mays fan. So thankfully, he stayed loyal to them when they moved in '59. So, I grew up just a San Francisco Giants absolute fanatic.
That's awesome. Because I wanted to ask you about that. If that's kind of why you guys stayed loyal to the team even though they moved. We talked before a little bit about pyroandballyhoo.com, how there's a lot more than just wrestling. And one of the great music articles you wrote about the Beatles and and I'm a huge Beatles fan. You wrote in there about how you actually have memories of watching them on Ed Sullivan only being 3 years old.
Oh, absolutely, I do, and I'll tell you what memories I have. And I to this day, I'm still so intrigued by this. And not many people talk about this, and not many people. I know a lot of people know about this, but man, it had to be like 66. So I had to be like 5 or 6 years old at the time. I was so captivated and spooked and horrified by that Paul McCartney deco. And I mean, when I was a kid, I was just completely, I was fascinated by it, you know, and I'd go back and I'd listen to, you know, all the hints in the albums and look at the albums.
Yeah.
And I mean, absolutely obsessed with it. But at the same time, it scared the ever-living crap out of me.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, and that was one of my really, I remember seeing him on Ed Sullivan, but I remember when that story broke about Paul, and like I said, it was like, it had probably about 66. That really, really turned me on to the Beatles, you know, finding the hints and listening to the albums and trying to hear things backwards and whatnot. And that was what really turned me on to the Beatles at the time.
Yeah, I know you're a John guy, right? Is that right?
You know, I am a John guy, but it's like, man, as I got older, you know, and it was like just, you know, the more and more and more I read about him, because like I'm constantly still to this day reading about them. And just the more I read about them and the older I get, you know, you kind of get like a different perspective of people. And, you know, I mean, I'm you know, John was bitter about a lot of things, but, you know, thank God, I mean, you know, unfortunately he left us at such an early age, which is sickening at 40 years old.
Yeah.
But the fact of the matter is, I think when he left, he was in a much, much different place. But, you know, the more I looked into his life as I got older, man, he had a lot of demons, you know, I mean, he really, really did. But, you know, growing up, he was definitely the one I looked up.
Well, the book about that your friend Keith Elliott Greenberg wrote about his the day he died there and everything. I would definitely, that's on my Christmas list, so I'm gonna definitely look into checking that out. But is there a particular? I know it's hard for Beatle fans. I know it is for me. But you know, true Beatle fans, they can't really pick a favorite song. I mean, it's hard to even pick top 5. But do you have a favorite album of theirs that you know the one that just is your go-to?
I think I can give you a favorite song, and I think I can give you a favorite album.
Oh, awesome! Okay.
To me, my favorite album is the original Help album. You know, and in the original album, you know, it was songs from the movie, but then it was also, you know, some just music tracks from the movie. My favorite Beatles era, like no doubt, was, you know, Rubber Soul, Help era. You know, that 66 era. Rubber Soul, I mean, it's just, I can just, that album just never, ever gets old. But I really like a lot of the songs on Help. And my song, you know, the one song that always stands out above everything else to me is Day Tripper. And I don't know if it's the beginning of the song. I don't know what it is, but, you know, that's the one song that was always my personal favorite. It's
one of the best guitar riffs in the history of rock, I think.
Man, I got to tell you, and this is no joke. I was such a Beatles mark my whole life, and about maybe 3 years ago, I actually got to go see Paul McCartney here in the Pepsi Center in Denver. And I swear, you know, I mean, I was 50 years old at the time, so I'm 53 now, and I could not even comprehend that I was in the same building as this man. Yep. Honestly, I've seen a lot of great artists in my life, but to be in the same place at the same time with Paul McCartney was, I couldn't even comprehend that I was looking at him. And, you know, but, you know, the Beatles have just had a huge impact on my life.
If you don't mind, I just to share a quick story. I got to see Paul I was in high school at the time. This was his first U.S. tour. I think it was like in 2002, and we were actually got front row. So being just that close to him, I had the same feelings that you had just seeing him. And he was doing a little, you know, stage rap before the song, and he said, you know, this one time when I went to Japan, and then I screamed out like, yeah, you know, I guess, you know, to reference the time he got busted for pot.
Right.
And then he looked over at me and he said, no, not that time. And
that's a great experience.
It was just, I mean, just seeing him and being in the same space as him was pretty crazy.
And that's the only, like I said, man, I've seen a lot of great artists. I mean, and I'm proud about that.
Yeah.
But being, like you said, you said it so perfectly. Being in his space was, I almost couldn't comprehend it.
It's I had a similar experience with another group that I know you're a big fan of, and I'm obsessed with these guys. It's Kiss. I wanted to really talk to you about them because I know you're a big Kiss fan, and I heard you talk about them quite a bit on Steve Austin's podcast too, because obviously he's a fan as well. Can you talk about discovering them? When did you see them in a magazine, or did somebody say, "Hey, you got to check these guys out"? How did you discover Kiss?
That's a great question, and I got to be honest with you. I love this interview, and I wish everybody would ask me these questions because I get so tired of talking about the other crap that means absolutely nothing. So this is fun for me, trust me. But I can remember that. I can remember being in like the 4th grade. I can vividly remember this. And I can remember there was a friend of mine, the kid's name was Larry Huggins. And he used to talk to me about this group Kiss. And like I can even remember at the time, the only albums out at the time were the first 3. So the Kiss,
so it's really
Hotter
early.
Than Hell, and Dress to Kill. That's Alive wasn't even out yet. And I remember I honestly was afraid of listening to Kiss. I mean, with the makeup, I didn't know if there were demonic references or if it was devil music. Like, I had no idea what it was. I really didn't. And it was almost like I was afraid to listen to it. Was it a type of heavy metal that I wasn't supposed to be listening to? And I mean, you know the images of Gene Simmons back then were, not Gene Simmons of Family Jewels.
Right.
This guy was a demon. I mean, he was an absolute monster, So, like, I'll never forget, 2 things happened to me on my 16th birthday that I'll never forget. First and foremost, on that day, I got my driver's. In Long Island, I was allowed to drive. On my birthday, I got my permit. And on the same day, and you may remember this from Long Island, I don't know how old you are, but there was a record store on Long Island called Jimmy's Music World. I don't know if you remember that.
No, I'm actually only 30, so I'm kind of behind the times here. Yeah,
it's before your time. But anyway, I went into Jimmy's Music World, and Rock and Roll Over had just come out. I bought Rock and Roll Over cold. I hadn't listened to any other Kiss album.
Wow.
I figured at that point at 16 I was old enough.
Yeah.
And of course, the first time I heard Rock and Roll Over, that was it. I mean, I was hooked. Like I said, I was 16 years old, so that was almost 40 years ago.
Wow. I discovered them actually from the Bill and Ted Bogus Journey movie. I was 7 years old, and they had the God Gave Rock and Roll to You song at the end of the credits. And being a 7-year-old kid, I just went out, and it was weird because being the early 90s, they were out of the makeup at that point, but it was fun to discover everything. This is before the internet, going with my dad and discovering all the old albums and, seeing the makeup and everything else. And I had that same sort of sense as a kid. It's funny that you mentioned that it was almost scary. The demonic thing with Gene and all that, especially, it was kind of crazy, but what's really interesting to me is talking to other fans who grew up in the 70s there. There seemed to be a point in time when Kiss, it was cool to like Kiss, and then all of a sudden it just changed. And then, you could, I don't want to, maybe get beat up for wearing a Kiss t-shirt or something. Did you sort of stick with them at that time? Or, as it kind of went along, I guess, into the disco thing with Dynasty and all that, did you stick with them during that time?
Yeah, I never left. I'll be honest with you. I never left. I was always very supportive. Saw them, concert through the non-makeup years and all that. But it wasn't, again, it was almost like a Lennon thing. But the older you get, like when you start, reading about Gene Simmons and reading all the other autobiographies by the cast members, about Gene, and the whole Rock and Roll Hall of Fame decision and all that, and how important money is to him, and how greedy this guy is. It kind of changed your perspective, of them. And my perspective has changed a great deal. But, I mean, there's still the part of me that, supported them for so long. And, I wouldn't be able to stop supporting them at this point.
Do you have a favorite era of theirs? Because mine would probably be actually the 80s era. I love Crazy Nights is probably my favorite album of theirs, oddly enough. And sometimes people think I'm crazy. I don't know. But do you have a favorite? Can you pinpoint a favorite era or album or two that you have for them?
No, I tell people this all the time, and they think I'm nuts too. I think Austin thought I was nuts. I loved Lick It Up. I thought Lick It Up, the first album without makeup, the only album that, Vinnie Vincent was on, I thought Lick It Up was phenomenal. I mean, to this day, that's one of my favorite albums.
Oddly enough, All Hell's Breaking Loose is one of my favorite songs. It's like really weird.
And it's a great video too.
The video, yeah, it's amazing. What were your thoughts when they took the makeup off? Did you watch the broadcast on MTV when they did that, or did you see? Do you remember seeing them the first time?
I mean, here's the funny thing, and that's a funny story. I mean, growing up, I idolized Gene. Well, behind my bed, I had a poster of Gene Simmons, and it was kind of taken from the floor looking up. And I mean, it made Gene in all his glory. I mean, he looked like he was 25 feet tall. And every time I looked at this poster as a teenager, I didn't think that, there wasn't anything I couldn't do. Looking at that poster inspired me, gave me the power to do anything. I mean, it really meant a lot to me, And I'll never forget, I'm sitting at the edge of my seat waiting for the moment on MTV with J.J. Jackson, and they're going to take the makeup off. And I swear, it's when they came to Gene, and the demon and all these years, and his posters over my bed and the whole 9 yards, they put the spotlight on Gene, and I just sat there and I said, oh my God, it's a Jewish guy from New York, because that's what he looked at. But you know what? I try to tell people this in wrestling. I used to try to tell some of the young guys in wrestling, to this day, and I'm 53 years old. To this day, when you see Gene Simmons, as Gene Simmons, and then when you see, the Demon, to this day, you still think they're two completely different people.
Absolutely.
There's no way that the Demon could be that guy on Family Jewels. And I used to use that as an example all the time to the younger wrestlers, just how Gene was able to get that Demon character over without saying a word. Gene didn't talk on stage. He didn't say a word. Everything was, facial expression and his eyes and his hands. And he got that character so over to the point of not believing that Gene Simmons, the man you saw on TV, was the same guy. And I've always thought, that was a just unbelievable attribute, as pertaining to Gene.
Okay, I just want to take a quick break from our interview to tell everybody about one of our great sponsors, WrestlingDVDnews.com. Visit WrestlingDVDnews.com for exclusive insider news and reviews on all the latest WWE DVDs and Blu-rays first. What's the next WWE DVD release on the horizon? Which should you buy and which should you avoid? How is the WWE Network changing the company's strategy on DVDs? Plus, get involved with their multiple giveaways each and every month for your chance to win WWE DVDs absolutely free. It's all happening now at WrestlingDVDnews.com. Now, back to our interview. Well, it's funny you brought up the connection with wrestling, and I was always a WWF guy, but I had to watch and tape the night that Kiss was on Nitro, and this was like worlds colliding for me. I mean, this was like the most amazing thing. So they're actually on Nitro and they perform and they debut the Demon character. You weren't there yet in WCW, but did you at all? I mean, try to get them back or involved in any way or something?
No, you know what nobody knows, because nobody ever asked me this question, okay? Gene Simmons called Vince McMahon first. And Vince McMahon took the meeting with Gene Simmons because I was working with Vince at the time. I think it was just me and him. And Vince knew I was a total Gene Simmons mark. So nobody ever. This is the first time I'm ever telling this story. So Gene Simmons, Vince took the meeting. It was Vince and Linda. They took a meeting with Gene. And he took it because of me. If you know Vince, you know he doesn't know anything about pop culture. And I doubt that even as huge as this was, Vince had no idea. So when Vince told me Gene Simmons called him, I'm like, bro, are you freaking kidding me? I'm like, you gotta meet with this guy,
Wow.
So, sure enough, Vince took a meeting with Gene, and this is all a 1,000% absolute shoot. Do you remember when the Playboy magazine came out with Kiss and all the girls were nude with the Kiss makeup?
I was too young to get it, but I remember it coming out. Absolutely, yeah.
Okay, that had just come out. And in Vince's meeting with Gene signed that magazine for me gave it to Vince. So then Vince, of course, in turn gave me the magazine. So, from there, after the meeting, Gene kept calling Vince and calling Vince and calling Vince, and Vince didn't want to go forward, with the idea of doing something on a permanent basis with Kiss. That's when however it happened, Gene Simmons got in touch with Eric Bischoff, and that's when they did the Demon character. But very few people know he contacted Vince first, and Vince wasn't interested.
That just blew my mind completely. Wow.
Yeah, no, it blew my mind. I mean, when Vince, I remember sitting at his living room table and him saying, Vince, you ever hear of a Gene Simmons? And I was like, excuse me? He goes, yeah, this guy from Kiss, he's calling my secretary wanting to set up a meeting with him. Do you know who he is? And I was like, are you freaking kidding me? And, they, like I said, they wound up having dinner, but Vince decided not to work with him.
Wow. Did you ever, like I said, I was going to say, I know, because I think they had, if I'm not mistaken, just from reading stuff at the time, wasn't it like a year contract that they were kind of locked into with the character with WCW? Did you ever try to, involve them any further when you were in WCW?
I definitely tried to. First of all, I don't know what the contract was, but I definitely tried to go forward with it because I knew that was my door to meeting Gene. And sure enough, bro, I was living in Atlanta at the time, and, we were moving forward with the Demon character, and I was very good friends with Dale Torborg, who's the greatest guy on the face of the planet. And, sure enough, Dale hooked up me meeting the band at Phillips Arena.
Oh, wow.
And actually, I shot vignettes with Gene Simmons. There's a couple of vignettes. Yeah, I have them. I mean, I still have them in my possession, but I actually shot vignettes with Gene, and I mean, it was, number one on my bucket list back then was meeting Gene Simmons. And, through that character and through all that at WCW, not only was I able to meet him, but I was able to actually, shoot some vignettes with him. That was just unbelievable.
That's amazing. I'm so glad I asked about that, because that was one of the things, again, like I said, the world's sort of colliding with Kiss and wrestling together. How many times would you say you've seen them live over the years? God,
I'd say, at least 15.
Wow.
Yeah,
well,
at least 15.
I saw the article you wrote on them recently on your site, and it was entitled "End It Now." Can you just just sort of reiterate maybe what the gist of that article was?
The gist of it was that, first of all, when they, I had no problem with band member changes during the years.
Mm-hmm.
I had no problem whatsoever. Bands break up. Peter Criss and H. Freely will be the first two guys that will tell you that they were an absolute mess, on drugs, on alcohol, the whole nine yards. They deserve to have been booted from the band.
Sure.
I never had any problem with that. I never had problems with, the Mark St. Johns and the Vinnie Vincents and everybody coming in and out. I was totally cool with that. However, the second they put Ace's face paint and Peter's face paint on Eric Singer and Tommy Thayer, I had a huge problem. I thought that was one of the most disrespectful things I've ever seen in my life. Screw Gene with his Kiss brand and all that. Ace and Peter put that band on the map just as much as Peter and Paul did. So, I had a huge issue with that. And at that point, I would never pay to see Kiss again. I'm like that. I'm not going to pay to see a fake Peter and a fake Ace. Just like I'm not going to pay to see a fake, Dennis DeYoung of Styx or a fake Steve Perry from Journey. I die before I go to see Journey in concert. And, so like I never went to see them in concert again. I saw them one time because Dale Torborg got me tickets to come. And because I didn't have to pay for the tickets, I went. But I from that point on, I would never pay a dime. Mm-hmm. So, a couple of months ago, they had a free concert that was being shown live on Yahoo. And, it was a Saturday night, and I'm like, yeah, let me see what they have left in the tank. So I put it on, and I mean, Paul's voice was horrifying. I mean, absolutely horrifying to the point of I felt bad for him. And I'm sitting there and I'm saying to myself, you've made enough money for your kids and their kids and their kids and their kids, probably 6 generations down the line. You've made enough money. You don't need a dime. Why would you want people that supported you for all those years, me being one of them, to see you go out like this? Where he couldn't sing anymore. It was hard to watch. And I mean, at that point, I was like, I don't know what their psychology is. I know Gene's psychology is to make money, but I don't know what Paul's psychology is. Is it that we want the younger generation to see Kiss because their fathers, were Kiss fans? I don't know what it is, but his voice was so awful that night. I was like, man, you guys have to hang this up, or you're just going to lose all credibility.
Well, I have to say, I did see them back in August, and in the tour, and I just keep up on everything and watch videos from every. I mean, I'm not crazy. I watch videos from every tour stop that they got, or see if there's any changes in the set list. Paul's voice has gotten a lot better. I guess he's been going to some specialists that's been helping him. Like it's a lot better. And plus, they're not. I mean, some of the songs they were doing, like "Heaven's on Fire" and things like that, he just can't sing anymore. He just can't. And they've lowered the tuning of the guitars and that thing. But and I think it's we're talking about the thing with Tommy and Eric, and for me it's probably different. I think because when I became a fan of theirs, Bruce and Eric were in Bruce Kulick and Eric Singer were in the band. So, I didn't grow up with them as Ace, and I got to experience it for the reunion tour. And of course the original lineup is always the best, by miles. But, I mean, it's just one of those things that a lot of Kiss fans are certainly divided on. And, I guess time will tell. They say that they're going to, that they could be replaced, and there's talks of them, continuing it on, but I guess time will tell with that.
That's the master plan. Gene's gonna, someday replace him and Paul, and it's still gonna be Kiss. And I mean, in my opinion, they're not Kiss now without Peter and Ace. I don't know how they could possibly, be Kiss without Paul and Gene, but that's his master plan.
Well, I guess switching gears a little bit from Kiss, I guess anybody that's seen any of your video interviews that you've done or any of the videos that you post, they see an imposing figure over your right shoulder, I believe it is, and it's a cutout of Sylvester Stallone as Rocky. I actually have the same exact thing in my office. That's here. So I wanted to ask you: are you a big Rocky fan, or is that just something that looks good in your house?
Bro, I've got Rocky tattooed on my body.
What? Really?
Do you know the cover of Rocky Balboa, where it's the black and white photo,
Of course, yeah.
and it's his back,
Yep.
and snow is falling. He's got the black sock hat, and he's got his right arm, fist pumped up in the air.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
That's tattooed on my arm.
That's amazing. That's
so
amazing.
I mean, that's the influence that, and I don't want to say Rocky, that's the influence that Sylvester Stallone has had on me for all these years. And it goes a little deeper than that for me, because it's not like I was a Sylvester Stallone mark and, for all his movies, even though I've seen the majority of them. And it wasn't that. I think it was, every interview I've ever seen him on, every time, I've seen him, on every talk show. Just every time I've seen Sylvester Stallone talk, he's always come across as just a likable, blue collar guy to me. I mean, from the first time I saw him all the way up to maybe a month ago, I think I saw him on Fallon, and he was the same guy. And growing up, I had a very close friend of mine who was a Sylvester Stallone fan as well, and just his mannerisms and the way he carried himself, I mean, were very, very close to Stallone. Mm-hmm. So, and unfortunately, that friend passed away. Oh. So, I think that's why I hold a special place for him, not just as the Rocky character, but as, Sylvester Stallone, and plus the fact that, people don't understand, he writes a majority of this stuff. Absolutely. The guy is a phenomenal writer. Yep. And I mean, as a writer, I'm totally fascinated by that. I mean, if you've ever gotten a chance to actually read the Rocky script,
I have.
I mean, it's unbelievable. And I mean, and it's people like that, that are just so creative, that I just kind of gravitate towards. So that's why, I mean, he's always been a special figure in my life.
Well, it's the same way with me. I of course I love Rocky, but I'm more of a Stallone fan in the sense of, just everything that you said, just how inspirational he is and how he came really from nothing and to everything that he is. It's funny you mentioned Rocky Balboa. This will give you an idea of how crazy of a Rocky fan I am. I saw the last movie, Rocky Balboa. I don't know if you want to guess. Maybe I'll just have you guess how many times I saw it in the theater.
In the theater?
Yeah.
6?
Nope.
How many?
25.
Are you serious?
And I have the ticket stubs to prove it. I saved all of them, and it was
That'd
funny because I never thought there was, as a lot of people thought Rocky 5 was it. So and I never thought, and then when it came out, I mean, it was, and I enjoyed the movie so much, and I was in college, my last year of college at the time, and after class I would just take people with me and say, who wants to go see Rocky? And I went with different people almost every time. And I only went by myself once, and it was fun to see it through other people's eyes, and people who had never seen Rocky before, and say, "Oh, this is really cool," and go back and watch the other movies. I mean, so it's one of those things that it like you said, even with your friend, it means different things to you at different times, and do you?
Oh yeah, that scene, on the street with his son is so relatable to me.
Yes.
Having a son at that age. I mean, I posted that on Pyro and Ballyhoo. That's kind of how Pyro and Ballyhoo is. I mean, I just posted that scene, and I'm like, you need to watch this, and you need to listen to this. And again, it goes back to, Sylvester Stallone wrote that scene and the emotion and the words and the way that scene is crafted, I don't think people appreciate him the way that they should. I think the guy is a genius.
Well, and you know, could digress for another quick story. My mom actually passed away last year, and after she passed away, my dad and I went on a trip. We always wanted to go to Philadelphia. We never had been there before, but we did the Rocky tour. I got all the addresses of all the locations, and we saw his apartment from the first one, the house with Adrian, obviously the steps, and we went to that same spot outside where that was at the Adrian's restaurant. There's a real restaurant there. And it was just kind of an amazing moment, you know, being there, you know, in that same spot that they were in. And
I did, like, you know, I mean, I did the steps many times, but I would have loved to do what you just did. That sounds amazing.
Well, it's still there, and you know, we actually, you know, it's kind of a funny thing. My dad and I both got matching the gloves. They came out with those, you know, the cufflinks that Mick gave them, the necklace.
Yeah.
They actually came out with those, and my dad had those. He had two of them. We have matching ones.
That's neat.
And we went, you know, there's another thing that's kind of interesting that's in Philadelphia. If you go to the cemetery there, I forget what the cemetery is, but we went, there's actually Adrian Balboa's grave, and it's kind of surreal to see that. Even though it's
Are you serious?
I swear you can look it up. It's really surreal, and it's actually, and they have the chair sitting, the chair that he had.
In the tree?
It's not in the tree, but it's sitting in front of it because they have it. It's not in the same location it was. They moved it up to the front, kind of in like a special area. But it's surreal seeing a fictional character's grave, and I had to tell myself, "Gee, Talia Shire's still alive," you know. And I was almost like mourning her in a sense, but she's, you know, the actress is still alive, but it was very surreal. So
yeah, that's amazing.
But yeah, I mean, Rocky is definitely, you know, I don't know if it's an Italian thing or what, but you know, because I'm a full Italian myself. I don't know what it is, but it's just something about those movies. Do you have? Can you rank them for me? I'm sure. I mean, I know it's different with everybody. Usually 5 is at the bottom of everybody's list, but can you?
I would probably go. I mean, I love, you know,
2. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I would go 2, 1. Oh man, I think I'd go Rocky Balboa 3. And then see the Clubber Lang and Drago is kind of close. I would probably go 3 and then 4. Yeah. What about you?
I have to go with Rocky Balboa because I saw it so many times. I can't. That can't be on my, you know, anywhere else. So Rocky Balboa, Rocky 2, Rocky 3 and 4 neck and neck. Just depends on my mood. I'd say probably 4, then 3, and then 5. But they're all collectively they're all my favorite movies. So they're all like, you know, together. You know, in that regard. So when I say that 3 and 4 or 5 are at the bottom of the list, I mean, I still love them, but you know, it's one of those things. It's I don't know if you've heard about the reboot that they're doing. I don't know if you've heard about they're doing another installment in the Rocky saga, and they're developing it's called Creed, and it's Apollo's grandson.
Yep.
And Stallone is, I guess, set to be in it, which is amazing.
I think that's supposed to be TV, though, right?
I heard it was a film. From everything that I've seen, it looks like it'll be a film. So I don't know. Again, seeing that Rocky character on the big screen, I don't know if I'll see that one 25 times, but I guess who knows? Time will tell. But you know, I guess switching gears again. You know, I guess we're talking about wrestling here. I think one of the biggest misconceptions of you, and I've seen, you know, and I actually interviewed Jim Cornette, and I spent a lot of time with him, and you know, I'm a fan of his too. But I think one of his big misconceptions, and a lot of people that think Vince Russo just wrote stuff just to pop ratings and do all this or whatever, and didn't know anything about wrestling. They don't know that you are, first of all, a lifelong fan of wrestling, but that you also trained to be a wrestler too. You also got some training.
Yeah, they know all that. They just, you know, people like Jim Cornette would never want to give me credit for that.
Okay,
but
sure, yeah.
Obviously, I started watching wrestling when I was about 12 or 13 years old. And when I decided that I wanted to, you know, pursue wrestling as a career, I went to, Johnny Rod's School of Wrestling in Brooklyn. Not that I wanted to be a wrestler, not that I wanted to be a manager, because I didn't want to do either one of those things. What I wanted to do was learn the business and get an education on the business and know the ins and the outs of the wrestling business before I ever became a part of it. And the only way to do that was to do what I did. And before before I started my radio show, before I ever worked for WWE, I mean, one of the first things I did was, go to Rod's school to get an education basically on, okay, how does this thing really work? And that's what I did.
What year or time frame is this? This is before, like, because you hear about Taz and all those guys that went through Johnny Rod's school. This is before all that.
About I want to say 90, 91.
Oh, okay.
Right.
Okay, so I guess backtracking a little bit, and when you're a fan, you said you're growing up and you're watching the WWF, correct?
Yes.
So do you? I guess what were some of your favorite guys at the time, and who sort of jumped out at you when you saw it on TV?
Well, the thing that always jumped out on me, and it's what gave me my style of wrestling, were the characters. I mean, that's what jumped out on me. I mean, I'm sure for Cornette, it was, the matches that he saw, that basically, molded his philosophy, as it related to wrestling. Well, with me, it was the characters. I mean, it was the characters and it was the storyline, and that's what I was immediately drawn to. I mean, I watched the matches, but the matches were never my favorite part. The individuals were. And when I say individuals, my earliest memories are guys like, the Valiant Brothers and Lou Albano and Chief J. Strongbow and Bruno and, Waldo Von Erich, George the Animal Steel, and the Grand Wizard of Wrestling. I mean, these were bona fide characters. And that's what my appeal was and what drew me to the wrestling business. So, of course, that's what molded me in my philosophy and my psychology going forward. I always, I've worked with so many people from so many different walks of wrestling. And like, here's the major difference between myself and Jim Cornette. I understood completely that the other people I worked with, their philosophy and their psychology, it all stemmed from what they grew up watching.
Mm-hmm.
That's where it stemmed from. And I mean, I've worked with people like, Jim Cornette, Jim Ross, Bill Watts, Vince McMahon, Eric Bischoff, Dusty Rhodes. I worked with so many people that grew up in different territories with different idea of what wrestling should be. And when I worked with these people, I didn't sit there and argue with them because I understood where their psychology came from. What I tried to do is I tried to understand it, and I tried to figure out like what I could do. With like I said, with Eric, what they did in Minnesota,
mm-hmm.
or with Bill Watts, what they did in Oklahoma and Texas over there. What could I use from there? Jim Cornette has always had heat with me because our wrestling philosophies are different, and to me that's ridiculous. I mean, it's absolutely ridiculous. No two people are going to look at wrestling the same way. But if you're going to let that seep over into, personal hatred, then, I mean, you're the one with the problem, not me, because I'm never going to hate anybody because their psychology and philosophy is different from mine. I'm not that way.
It's the same thing with politics or anything like that. It's just, it's people's opinion. It doesn't mean that they're a bad person if they think this way or whatever. But again, that's my opinion too. I definitely see what you're saying there. And thinking about, I guess, getting back to the early days that you were getting involved with or getting into wrestling. Did you get to go to Madison Square Garden back in the day? Did you get to experience it? What a live event was like back then?
I never went to a Bruno show at the Garden. The closest I went to, and you mentioned it earlier before, back in the days of, and Albano and the Valiants were on the card. I remember Albano and the Valiants were on the card. Chief Jay Strongbow was on the card. Haystacks Calhoun was on the card. Ivan Putchke was on the card. And it was the very first show I went to, and it was at the Comac Arena.
Wow.
Yeah, and then I would go to Garden shows after that, but I'm talking about the, Hulk Hogan, Randy Savage era Garden shows. So, like, I never went back in the Bruno. I saw Bruno wrestle. I saw Bruno wrestle at the Nassau Coliseum, but I was never there on a Monday night, Madison Square Garden show when Bruno was defending the belt. I was never at one of those.
It's one of those things where it's again, it's hard for people even in my generation, of course, a lot younger, to understand or what that was like. Just with one punch, just that how the crowd would erupt, or just the simplest of things it seemed like, and just how crazy.
Oh God, I'll never forget. Like when I was a kid, and I'm a kid. I was maybe 14 years old. I'll never forget. Chief Jay Strongbow used to be tag team partners, and his tag team partner was a guy by the name of Spiros Arion. Mm-hmm. And I'll never forget. During the course of the match, Arion turned on Chief. And, Chief used to have this beautiful ceremonial headdress. I mean, unbelievable looking thing. And, Arion started pulling the feathers out of the headdress and shoving them down, Chief's throat. And I mean, that was when I was about 14, 15 years old. I've never forgotten that to this day. And that's why, with me, it was always those big moments, that were memorable for me. Those unbelievable moments. I mean, you've seen one match, you've pretty much seen them all. That's my opinion, anyway. Mm-hmm. Yes, some matches are better than others, but at the end of the day, there's only so much you can do in a wrestling match. There's only so many wrestling finishes. But it's the drama between the characters, and when stuff like that happens, those are the memorable moments that stay with you forever. And that was basically the psychology during the Attitude Era. Let's give these people moments, and let's make this a spectacle, and let's give them characters that they can remember. The problem why. It's not that Vince Russo, did everything for ratings and this, that, and the other thing. The problem is, once I left the WWE and once the Attitude Era was over, the WWE went back to what they knew, and what they know is wrestling. And Ed Ferrara and myself, we were television writers. We weren't bookers, so it was a different brand. But once they went back to wrestling, they just went back to drawing the wrestling fans. And that's why the numbers are where they are. There's no question in my mind that those numbers that were achieved in the Attitude Era could have been maintained if the product would have continued to evolve rather than go backwards the way it did.
And that concludes part one of my interview with Vince Russo. As you could tell, we had a lot of fun talking about everything that not only stuff that we had in common, but even the baseball stuff. And it's just really interesting, getting to to talk to somebody like this on this level. Most of his interviews really cover a lot of what maybe since he, is a writer, maybe what he would do to fix things, or, they might cover, different things this time in TNA and all that stuff, and a lot of the controversial stuff. And again, we wanted to get away from that. We had fun talking about Kiss, as you heard, and I thought I was the biggest Rocky Balboa fan out there, but I didn't know that Vince actually has a tattoo. So it's really, really fun and cool to hear a lot about that stuff. But don't worry. Part 2, we're going to cover a lot more wrestling stuff. We're going to get into, how he started, his first wrestlers he met when he worked at Video Store, and he was booking them and having them come in and do signings for those old Coliseum videos and everything like that. So there's a lot of cool stories coming up in Part 2 next week. So before that, though, make sure you check out the show. This Friday, we're going to, debut a lot of, new, interesting, fun segments that we're going to have. We're going to be, I got the next edition of Promo Theater, which is a big one, and I'm really excited about. So make sure you check out the show Friday. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you for listening. For more, visit the Network Nation at 999nation.com.